I'm going to walk you through all of the skills that you need to get offers from the top tech companies for PM roles for 500, 600, 700,000 and above in total compensation. Look, this is a big list, so we're going to go over it. We're going to cover it briefly, but they just don't hand out these jobs out there for 500,000. So you're going to have to do quite a bit. You're going to have to become an expert in a lot of this stuff. So let's go over this, and we will comprehensively cover each one of these in follow-up videos or maybe in past videos if you're watching this in the future. But for now, this is an overview. So let's dig in. First, resume building. Yep, you're going to have to be an expert in resume building because you're going to have to go and apply for a lot of different jobs. Let's just focus on some of the fundamentals here. Impact. You're going to have to learn how to showcase your impact. That means you're going to have to learn how to actually work and demonstrate and look and build impact in your job, on the job right now, but certainly how to demonstrate it on the resume. You're going to have to learn how to prioritize. That means put the stuff that the recruiter is looking for or a particular job is looking for at the top so that there's higher chance that they actually will see it. You're going to have to learn how to customize and match the stuff that the hiring manager and the recruiters actually need in your resumes or in your outreach. Brevity. You're going to have to do it all quickly because no one has time anymore and recruiters are inundated by hundreds of resumes, as you know. You're going to have to learn how to identify the problem of the people who you're trying to help. And when you are applying for a job, you're trying to help hiring managers and recruiters. So that's what you're going to have to learn around resumes. LinkedIn. Realistically, you're going to be on LinkedIn. You're going to solve a lot of your job search issues on LinkedIn. So you're going to have to become an expert in that, both the inbound and the outbound. Inbound is everything where people find you on LinkedIn, and that means optimizing your LinkedIn, your profile, your headline, your about page, your skill set. Everything in there has to be optimized for people that are either finding you accidentally or on purpose, meaning searching for someone with your skills or background. Outbound means everything that you do in order to try to get a job or another network or another way into an opportunity. So everything on LinkedIn, you're going to have to become an expert in inbound and outbound. Next, focus. I call this out as a standalone area because there's so much to cover here and you're going to have to do it in a particular order. And when you're focusing on a particular element, you have to really remove everything else. So when you're working on your resume, you have to stay focused. When you're working on your interview stuff, you have to stay focused on that. It's going to take a tremendous amount of focus on every stage: the resume, the application, the outreach, and all of the practice, the interview practice that we're about to talk about, all of the stuff below here. So focus is a requirement. Next, along the same vein, sort of like these softer skills, a little bit harder to nail down, but I have to call them out because this is what I see makes the difference between success and failure. Perseverance. There's a lot in here that you're going to have to work on over a long period of time. We call this the marathon mindset inside the Product Career Accelerator. We talk about certain things you're going to need to do every single day. Top of funnel work, for instance, meaning reaching out to people, writing emails, messages, and just generating those interviews on your calendar. That's something you have to do every single day, sometimes for months and months. And certainly the interview preparation is very time consuming as well, and it is somewhat repetitive. We have ways to make it interesting and fun and ultimately would make you a better PM. But look, it definitely requires perseverance. So I want to call this out separately. We're going to get to some of the harder skills a little bit lower, but these are in relative order of priority and in relative order of events. So as you start working through these. Communication is obviously a big one. In communication, you need to learn to communicate in a different way during a recruiter conversation, hiring manager conversation, and all the what we call core interviews: product design, business strategy, product strategy, analytical, execution, leadership. You're going to have to learn how to communicate via written assignments. Now, you're a PM, so probably you know how to do this already, and presentations and verbal communication, but I have to call this out as a separate element because a lot of the time your communication skills are being directly evaluated. Next, let's get into the behavioral interviews. These are questions such as tell me about a time you did something or how would you handle situation X. You're going to have to learn certain answer frameworks. Certain ones work better than others. I'm sure you've heard of STAR. Inside PCA, we use SAIL, Situation, Action, Impact, Learning, but we also add hook and principles before that. So you're going to have to learn specific methodologies and learn how to internalize some of your stories, your situations to those frameworks so it makes sense. Common company attributes. So all companies that are doing behavioral questions, they want to see whether you will match the way that their company operates. So you're going to have to learn common attributes. You're going to have to learn specific attributes of different companies where you're interviewing. Story creation and refinement. You're going to have to spend time figuring out how to tell your stories, what those stories even are, how to refine them, how to think about your principles, how you make decisions, how do you deal with conflict, how do you, in general, work as a product manager effectively. Hook development for your stories. How do you make it interesting for the interviewer? That's a separate skill. Matching questions and answers with the attribute being assessed. When you get a question, hey, tell me about a conflict, tell me about how you launched this or your most successful launch or some of your weaknesses, you have to quickly map what element is being assessed, what part of the rubric is being assessed here, and which answer from your prepared stories better applies here. And this also applies largely, basically, to any behavioral questions. You really want to tell the right story for the right question. Leaving anchors as you speak, it's a separate skill to learn how to leave little breadcrumbs along the way without going into a big story kind of side quest, but leaving those anchors and hooks so that you can follow up or the interviewer can follow up. You effectively tell additional details or give additional details without spending a lot of time. And of course, time management itself is a skill you're going to have to learn. You will always have a limited amount of time to do this, especially for behavioral questions. Time management also applies to every single other type of interview question, but it especially applies to behavioral because those can really be 2, 3, 4, 5 minute discussions, and time management becomes even more important. General interview skills. Let's get into some of these. For every question, you're going to have to disambiguate. What is actually being asked? Do you understand the question? Can you clarify certain parts of the question without asking too many specific questions that require the interviewer to make choices? The second piece here is leadership, because you've got to lead the interview, especially for higher levels of PM interviews. Brevity. Can you actually be brief? You've got 40 minutes for the whole thing. Can you answer a question in depth and then provide the necessary breadth and depth for each question? Brevity is similar and synonymous with time management there, learning all the different skills. How do you cut time, minutes off of certain parts of the answer? Which parts are not as important as others? Next one is structured thinking. In general, can you share the way that you think about certain problems? And this applies for every part of the answer. How do you structure what you're about to say in a way that is also not too time consuming? And creativity, it's a strange maybe skill to put here. It feels like a soft skill, but there's certain ways you can actually have structured creativity where you know certain approaches to how to make permutations, combinations, and just to do a creativity that's time bound and using certain approaches to try certain things. Creativity is important to get the extra points and for higher level PM interview questions. Now let's get into specific types of interview questions, such as product design. First element, framing and scoping the problem. You're going to get a prompt, usually design this or improve that. How do you figure out what to work on? There's often a giant scope of things that you could do, an almost unlimited set of possibilities. How do you frame and scope the problem down and choose what you're actually going to work on? User segmentation is usually next. How do you choose who to focus on? Which customers, which users, which groups? How do you make those choices? What are the different ways that you could segment? Identifying problems and pain point is a separate skill that you need to get good at. Finding the actual problems in the situation. Next one is prioritization, and this goes not just for product design, really everything. Prioritization is how do you make decisions? How do you choose this over that? What is your system for doing that? You need a system. You need an approach. You need to be able to share, talk to that approach, and also use it on the interview itself. Solutioning, coming up with solutions that work, that are pragmatic, but at the same time, perhaps They have a bit of a moonshot component to them. They have a bit of a creative component to them. Maybe they have second order thinking behind them. They solve other problems for the business. So there's a skill involved to the solutioning once you've identified the pain points. So these are the mini skills for product design. Let's dig into strategy. This could be business strategy and product strategy. If it's business strategy, consumer trends, you're going to have to be familiar and learn the different consumer trends that are going on, consumer preferences, and the technological trends, what's happening, of course, in the world of AI, for instance, or electronics, or different industries, business models. What are the different ways that you could make money in a different environment? What are the ways that companies have done this successfully and feel comfortable with this to be able to change this around for even existing business models? How do you switch them to different ones in a way that's successful for the customers and the business? Scaling scenarios and challenges, what I mean is all businesses go through similar types of problems and challenges as they scale. 100 users, 1,000 users, 10,000, a million, 100 million, a billion. And the challenges can be very similar along a certain path of scale. So understanding the types of challenges and how to get past them as you deal with different levels of scope and scale. The concept of build, buy, or partner in most situations in business, depending on the size, the bigger the company, the more this option becomes a reality. You don't always have to develop something. You can just buy it, acquire it, or you can partner with someone, some other company or organization that basically can solve the same problem, but in a more efficient way. So when is it better to build versus buy versus partner? This is a typical consulting question, but commonly used in strategy interviews. Multi-order consequence, this is not just first order thinking. As a result of this thing that you're proposing or this change that's happening, what's the second order? What's the third order? Train yourself to think in these type of multi-order consequence events. And making bets. This is similar to prioritization, but there's a heavier component of likelihood, probability, and you are thinking about what is best for the company and for products sometimes in terms of making bets. And you want to talk about that during the interview. Often the question could be completely open-ended. What should we invest in? So how do you think about the company making those bets, making their investment bets? There's a heavy ROI component in there, return on investment, heavy thinking about resources, the different costs, and the potential benefit to the company. GTM more applies to product strategies. How do you actually launch something? This applies to business models as well. But how do you bring something to market? What are effective ways of getting the word out or partnering with certain groups or other companies? And how does launch happen? How does iteration happen? These type of thought processes. So that's the strategy. Now into the analytical type of interview. Analytical could be broad. It could cover a lot of topics. So let's just cover the skills that you absolutely must have. Root cause analysis is effectively thinking about problems. Something has gone wrong. What happened? How do you analyze it? How do you assess it? How do you find the problem? How do you fix it? Setting product goals, very common. It's similar to setting business goals, but a little bit different because you're dealing with a certain product in a certain stage of its life cycle. How do you set those product goals based on what the company mission is, current situation, and the current state of the product? Of course, setting metrics, setting the North Star metrics, setting other metrics, counter metrics, thinking about counter metrics, and trade-offs. Should we do this or should we do that? Again, prioritization comes up, but now in the context of we can do choice A, choice B, choice C. Each has pros and cons. How do you effectively communicate that? And how do you make the right decision and prove to the interviewer that this indeed is the right decision? Finally, if you've done all this correctly, you're going to have to learn some offer negotiation fundamentals in order to actually get those big offers. Because after everything's said and done, you put all of this work, you could still get a very low offer. And if you don't know how to do this or you don't have any help, you might get half of what you actually could get. So learning the core principles of offer negotiation, we talk a lot about this in PCA, but effectively, this is understanding what you are actually going to be delivering for the business or company that's hiring you and what are they going to pay you for it. Interview timeline management means How do you schedule interviews in such a way that you could be in a position to get multiple offers, depending on the timelines of different companies? Startups move fast, big companies move slow. So owning and organizing this interview timeline management. Inside PCA, we've got CSMs, your product coaches, and your support folks, support team that helps you organize those things and make sure that we're optimizing for the offer. Verbal negotiation, of course, is an element that people don't want to do, and that's why they miss out on a lot of big offers. Learning the skills required to verbally negotiate. This concept of partnership and gratitude, which is key to a lot of our offer negotiation, is understanding how to actually partner with your recruiting team that you're working with in a particular company, and have you and the recruiting team versus the hiring committee, so to speak. And finally, you do need to think like an investor and evaluate your future equity value, because a lot of times for startups especially, people just make all kinds of random guesses. They have no idea what they're getting into. They're getting shares. They have no idea what these shares are worth, probably nothing, and what they could be worth. So you have to learn how to think like effectively an investor that's evaluating a company and its likelihood to success, the horizons to perhaps you getting some upside from an offer with equity involved. So those are all of the many skills that you need in order to actually get those $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 offers. Next time we'll talk more about each one of these specifically, but in the meantime, I think you got plenty of work to do. So let's get started. See you next time.